Hello, and welcome back to Bedtime Stories with Vice Vice Baby, where we will continue good stories for great holidays. A Brave Girl by James Johonot. Adapted. In the year 1781, the war was chiefly carried in the south, but the north was constantly troubled by the hands of Tories and Indians, who would swoop down on small settlements and make off with whatever they could lay their hands on. During this time, General Schuyler was staying at his house, which stood just outside the stockade of walls of Albany. The British commander sent out a party of Tories and Indians to capture the general. When they reached the outskirts of the city, they learned from a Dutch laborer that the general's house was guarded by 6 soldiers, 3 watching by night and 3 by day. They let the Dutchman go, and as soon as the band was out of sight, he hastened to Albany and warned the general of their approach. Schuyler gathered his family in one of the upper rooms of his house, and giving orders that the doors and windows should be barred, fired a pistol from a top-story window to alarm the neighborhood. The soldiers on guard, who had been lodging in the shade of a tree, started to their feet at the sound of the pistol. But alas, too late, for they found themselves surrounded by a crowd of dusky forms, who bound them hands and foot before they had time to resist. In the room upstairs, the sturdy general standing resolutely at the door with gun in hand, while his slaves were gathered about him, each with a weapon. At the other end of the room, the women were huddled together, some weeping and some praying. Suddenly a deafening crash was heard. The Indian band had broken into the house. With loud shouts they began to pillage and destroy everything in sight. While they were yet busy downstairs, Mrs. Schuyler sprang to her feet and rushed to the door, for she had suddenly remembered that the baby, who was a few months old, was asleep in its cradle in a room on the first floor. The general caught his wife in his arms and implored her not to go to certain death, saying that if anyone was to go, he would. While this generous struggle between husband and wife was going on, their younger daughter, who had been standing near the door, glided by them and descended the stairs. All was dark in the hall, excepting where the light shone from the dining room in which the Indians were pillaging the shelves and fighting over their booty. How to get past the dining room door was the question, but the brave girl did not hesitate. Reaching the lower hall, she walked very deliberately forward, softly but quickly passing the door, and, unobserved, reached this room in which was the cradle. She caught up the baby, crept back past the open door, and was just mounting the stairs when one of the savages happened to see her. Whiz! And a sharp tomahawk struck the stairwell within a few inches of the baby's head. But the frightened girl hurried on, and in a few seconds was safe in her father's arm. As for the Indians, fearing an attack from the nearby garrison, they hastened away with the booty they had collected and left General Schuyler and his family unharmed. The Boston Tea Party by John Andrews. Adapted. On November 29, 1773, there arrived in Boston Harbor a ship carrying 100 and odd chests of the detested tea. The people in the country round about, as well as the townsfolk, were unanimous against allowing the landing of it. But the agents in charge of the consignment persisted in their refusal to take the tea back to London. The town bells were rung for a general muster of the citizens. Handbills were stuck up calling on friends, citizens, countrymen. Mr. Roch, the owner of the ship, found himself exposed not only to the loss of his ship, but to loss of the money value of the tea itself. If he should attempt to send her back without clearance papers from the custom house, for the admiral kept the vessel in readiness to seize any ship which might leave without those papers. Therefore, Mr. Roch declared that his ship should not carry back the tea without either the proper clearance or the promise of full indemnity for any losses he might incur. Matters continued thus for some days, when a general muster was called of the people of Boston and all the neighboring towns. They met to the number of 5 or 6,000 at 10 o'clock in the morning in the Old South Meeting House, where they passed a unanimous vote that the tea should go out of the harbor that afternoon. A committee, with Mr. Roch, was sent to the custom house to demand a clearance. This the collector said he could not give without the duties first being paid. Mr. Roch was then sent to ask for a pass from the governor, who returned answer that, consistent with the rules of government and his duty to the king, he could not grant one without any produced a previous clearance from the office. By the time Mr. Roch returned to the Old South Meeting House with this message, the candles were lighted and the house still crowded with people. When the governor's message was read, a prodigious shout was raised, and soon afterward, the moderator declared the meeting dissolved. This caused another general shout, outdoors and in, and what with the noise of breaking up the meeting, one might have thought that the inhabitants of the infernal regions had been let loose. That night, there mustered upon Fort Hill about 200 strange figures, said to be Indians, from Narragansett. They were clothed in blankets, with heads muffled, and had copper-colored countenances. Each was armed with a hatchet or axe, and a pair of pistols. They spoke a strange, unintelligible jargon. They proceeded 2 by 2 to Griffin's Wharf, where 3 tea-ships lay, each with 114 chests of the ill-fitted article on board. And before 9 o'clock in the evening, every chest was knocked into pieces and flung over the sides. Not the least insult was offered to anyone, save one Captain Connor, who had ripped out the linings of his coat and waistcoat, and, watching his opportunity, had filled them with tea. But, being detected, he was handled pretty roughly. They not only stripped him of his clothes, but gave him a coat of mud, with a severe bruising into the bargain. Nothing but their desire not to make a disturbance prevented his being tarred and feathered. The tea being thrown overboard, all the Indians disappeared in a most marvelous fashion. In the next day, if a stranger had walked through the streets of Boston and had observed the calm composure of the people, he would hardly have thought that 10,000-pound shirling of East India Company's tea had been destroyed the night before. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Bedtime Stories with Vice Baby. I hope you'll have a good night and sweet dreams.